My Childhood.
Hi, thank you for listening to episode 3 of Ruin My Childhood. I'm Mike.
And I'm Kat.
Today we're going to be talking about a wonderful, I think it was a Disney Channel cartoon called Gargoyles.
It is our first TV show episode.
So unfortunately, we're not going to be able to watch the entire series when we're doing these podcasts, so we're just going to watch a couple episodes and see if it's something that would excite us as adults and make us maybe want to continue watching. So I think Gargoyles is a pretty good show to start with. I remember watching Gargoyles and loving it. I remember my dad sitting down and watching Gargoyles with me when it was on. So I feel like this is going to be a pretty good TV series, although I don't know if my dad's taste is necessarily the best, but we'll see.
I mean, your dad likes Gilmore Girls, so maybe. My memory of Gargoyles is very limited. I think the majority of the time when I was watching this, it was when my dad, who works in emergency management, was stationed in Los Angeles for the Northridge earthquake, and we lived in Northern California, so we would drive down for a couple of days a week just so we could see my dad because he was deployed for a really long time on that earthquake. And in the hotel room in the embassy suites, we had access to the channel that Gargoyles played on, whereas we didn't have it at home. So really, it was just a Los Angeles Northridge earthquake series that I watched.
Like, thinking about it, because we never had Disney Channel until I was in high school. I think this was maybe on ABC and then was on Disney Channel when it got like syndicated or something like that. But I remember really liking it because it was kind of dark, or at least I remember it being dark. It probably wasn't that dark because it was a 90s cartoon, but for like a kid, it's pretty dark, and it had these like cool monster guys, but also had like a sense of honor. And I remember there was like a fun one.
I don't remember the fun one. I just remember it being really serious and dark the whole time, and that really appealed to me.
Like, I think this was like a darker version of like Power Rangers is what I remember. So this came out when I was, I want to say like 6 or 7, so I was a little bit older as a kid. This was like post Power Rangers. Like, I was too old for Power Rangers, but this was dark and really cool, and I really liked it. I don't remember all the characters' names. Like, I know they were all named after something in New York, with the exception of the main guy. I know his name was Goliath. And then there was like Bronx and Brooklyn, and I don't remember the other one. Was it actually
set in New York? For some reason, I thought it was set in like a fictional city.
No, it's set in New York. What happened is, as best as I can remember, the beginning, like the first episode takes place in like Scotland in like the 13 or 1400s, like Macbeth days. In fact, I think Macbeth in this universe is a real person. And I know like it starts with that, and there's like a wizard or whatever, and they get frozen for like 500 years or something like that. And they're on this castle in Scotland. And some like billionaire who's like a Lex Luthor, Tony Stark kind of character buys this castle and like moves it and puts it on top of like a skyscraper in New York. And that's how they end up in New York.
That's bizarre. Who the hell wrote that?
I don't know, but it gets really cool. Like, I remember, so like Goliath has like this female gargoyle that he was in love with, but she's been around this entire time. And so she's gone a little evil, and he's still this honorable good guy. So there's like that weird dynamic. You know, this human bad guy makes, I think, robot gargoyles based off Goliath. Like, they look like robotic versions of him, but I think he ultimately becomes a good guy. And I think Macbeth is the actual bad guy, like the Shakespearean Macbeth. But I don't really remember. Like, I watched this entire series as a kid, but I have not watched it since then. And this is something that I've always hoped they would make, like, a live-action version. I think it could be really cool.
It could be really cool visually.
Like, Guillermo del Toro making Gargoyles would be awesome. There's always been 2 projects that I've said Guillermo del Toro should make. I grew up not liking Pokemon, but I've always said that Guillermo del Toro would make an amazing live-action Pokemon.
Wasn't that almost a thing?
Not that I know of.
Oh.
He almost made Beauty and the Beast, and then I think he'd be an amazing director for a live-action Gargoyles. I think Gargoyles would be one of those movies that could stand up on its own as a live-action remake, and I would watch the hell out of it.
I think good old Billy's a little busy for Gargoyles, though.
Maybe.
Maybe.
So
right.
I'm excited to watch it. I think we should just go watch it, and we'll get back to you guys and tell you what we thought.
Yeah, I hardly remember anything about it. I just remember really liking it when I had the opportunity to watch it. So I'm going into this almost completely blind.
Excellent.
Let's do this.
1,000 years ago, superstition and the sword ruled. It was a time of darkness. It was a world of fear. It was the age of gargoyles. Stone by day, warriors by night. We were betrayed by the humans we had sworn to protect, frozen in stone by a magic spell for 1,000 years. Now here in Manhattan, the spell is broken, and we live again.
So we just finished watching Gargoyles. We watched 3 episodes just to kind of get a feel for it. You said you kind of only watched it infrequently. What did you feel this time?
I actually really liked it this time. I didn't think I would, and I didn't think I would be that interested. But I think there's something about how it's set in Scotland initially, and there's obviously something deeper going on, and you kind of have that aspect of them relearning what the world is like that makes it much more interesting.
I see. I kind of had the opposite. I don't want to say that I didn't like it, but I remember really liking this as a kid. And I feel like this show, as for a child at least, is initially hard to follow. Like, it takes an episode and a half for them to really be in New York. And then none of the characters have names. Like, they named the Goliath has a name in the first episode. Then they named the older gargoyle, Hudson, in the middle to end of the 3rd episode. And there's still 3 other characters that don't have names. So that's kind of weird. And I remember, like you mentioned, like there's the hint at things to come. I remember vaguely some of the things that happened, and I was kind of like, man, this just should just go into it. Like, the first 5 episodes are them just getting to New York and figuring out New York, and they all have the same episode name.
Yeah, so how many did we watch? We watched 3?
We watched 3 of the 5 introductory episodes.
Yeah, and I feel like they are definitely mostly set up, but I still want to see more. And I don't really feel like this is actually a cartoon for young kids. I feel like this is one of those cartoons that was more in the vein of like James Bond Jr. that was aimed at like middle schoolers and older. I think
it gets more cartoony later. Once they get more established and they have their names, some of them are very cartoony. Like I think this was meant for like 7, 8, 9-year-olds, like preteens.
Really? Because they would not be able to follow the first few episodes.
That's what I kind of figured. Like, even me as an adult, maybe it's just because I'm impatient and I know it's coming. I was just like, come on, just get into it. Like, initially, I liked the first episode because it starts with them in New York and the building collapsing, and then it immediately flashes back to Scotland. And some of the Scotland stuff was cool, but then it just didn't progress for 3. It didn't really progress for almost 2 full episodes. Like, for even a middle school kid or a tween or whatever you call like the pre-teens, I felt like this probably wouldn't hold your attention.
Yeah, but then again, what was the schedule like back then airing cartoons? Because this was
a Saturday morning cartoon.
Okay, interesting.
So this was owned by like Disney and ABC. It was on ABC's Saturday morning show lineup, and then on its 3rd season, I believe it like switched to being like on Disney something, but it was still on ABC. But it was like a premium Disney slot on ABC on Saturday morning. So it was meant for kids to be watching on their day off.
Yeah. Well, it had to be getting some viewership if they continued making it for as long as they did.
Yeah, I think it was 3 seasons, but I think in season 3 they switched the entire creative team.
Yeah. Was it like a completely different show after that, or was it pretty much the same?
I don't remember. So what I remember, and while watching this, I did have some of this stuff kind of come back, like the assistant guy, Owen, who worked for Xanatos, who, let's be real, Xanatos is Jonathan Frakes from Star Trek. That's Commander Riker, and he looks and sounds exactly like Commander Riker.
He doesn't sound exactly like him or
it's
look
just his
exactly
regular
like
voice.
him.
It's just his regular voice. But his assistant guy, Owen, when I don't remember what he is, but I remember seeing him, I'm like, that guy's magic. I don't remember what, but I know he's like a magical creature. Huh. And I know like Macbeth shows up later, and he's like Macbeth from the Shakespearean play, but I think Macbeth has magic.
Yeah, I asked a friend of mine for recommendations on which episodes we should watch, but then we eventually decided to just watch the first few, and he said that the Macbeth ones are definitely the strongest ones of the series.
And then I know that I think it overlaps with the Midsummer's Night Dreams as well, because I think Oberon and Puck are in it as bad guys as well.
That's so random.
Yeah, Oberon, Puck, and Macbeth are all bad guys in this TV show eventually.
So they couldn't really decide like what universe they wanted to be in, and so they sort of threw in Shakespeare.
Yeah, and then I know eventually Xanatos Like, I think the Xanatos elements are cool. Like, I think in the first season, Xanatos is kind of the bad guy, and then it transitions to being, like, this more magical world. Because I know Xanatos ends up creating, like, robotic gargoyles, and they have to fight robotic gargoyles and stuff like that. Like, the episode that we ended on was getting pretty interesting. So, basically what happens is gargoyles help defend this castle. There are these invaders that are coming. The gargoyles scare them off, and then one of the human guards ends up betraying the whole castle and the gargoyles and convinces the gargoyles to go somewhere else. The castle gets taken over. Gargoyles go to rescue them again, but for some reason, the wizard advisor thinks that the gargoyles accidentally got the princess killed, so he casts a spell on them to stay stone until the castle goes over the clouds. Xanatos went to the castle specifically to find the gargoyles, so it's from the very beginning, it is magical, and you know that Xanatos has, like, some weird subplot. Like, initially, he's like, just help me guard my castle because the castle is where I keep all my secrets.
I feel like he's a villain with a conscience.
I think he is. I think he starts off as more just, like, a generic, like, Lex Luthor, I'm a businessman villain, but I think he does transition into being kind of a more likable human character.
Yeah, because I don't remember him at all from watching this when I was a kid. But I definitely get the sense that his character, I mean, you haven't quite established, like, you get the sense that he's a little bit shady from the first couple episodes, but I kind of feel like he's going to go a lot darker, but doesn't necessarily want to take that route.
Yeah, from the very beginning, he's lying to Goliath. Like, he tries to send Goliath to go do, like, a industrial espionage, corporate espionage mission where he's going to go steal 3 floppy disks. This is from the 90s cartoons when everything was on a floppy disk. Like,
why are you going to send this giant guy who basically, like, destroys everything he touches?
You know, the other thing that was kind of weird is it doesn't seem like they're very consistent with, like, how strong they are.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the first episode, Goliath catches a sword, and he has, like, a single drop of blood, and the invaders are like, they bleed, we can kill it, kind of thing, like from Predator. But then he's able to get tranked by just, like, a single trank dart, and, like, it doesn't bring him down, but you would think a trank dart from just a regular gun would not be able to even pierce the skin of a gargoyle. So that, I don't really know. And he can claw through walls and everything like that. He might have killed a guy in that scene where him and the cop stop the carjacking.
So, like, episode 3, it just kind of gets crazy with the amount of destruction. Like, he catches this detective woman when he basically scares her off the side of the building, and then he kind of, like, blames her for being scared. And then he picks her up and puts her on his back, and he's just clawing his way up the side of the building unapologetically. Like, he is totally trashing this building with his claws. Does not give a flying rat.
No.
And then later on, they stop a carjacking, which, dude, that wife was brutal. Like,
oh, she was so mean to him.
That was some pretty intense verbal abuse from, like, those secondary characters. And they stopped this carjacking, and it was totally random, like, where these guys came from. I don't know what their agenda was or anything like that, but they basically just, like, saw this guy on their turf and decided to carjack him. So the detective steps in, and they take the bait, and this gargoyle just, like, straight up kills them. I mean, usually when people are injured, you'll see them writhing on the ground a little bit, but these guys were just, like, still. They were dead.
So, yeah, it's pretty crazy because, I think her name is, like, Mayaz or something like that. Detective Mayaz, Latina. Maza, that's what it was.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. They had a Latina back in the day, considering, like, so many main characters are just white.
Yes.
I figured if, like, they had, like, one human main character, they weren't going to make them anything but white, but that's a nice surprise.
I'm not surprised they did a woman because I think this was very much in the vein of Ninja Turtles with, like, April O'Neil. So she's just like the Latin April O'Neil, and a cop versus a reporter. So it's still kind of plug and play.
I think a cop is way more interesting than a reporter. Journalism is so played out.
Not in the 90s.
Ugh.
So, yeah, she just was like, hey, I'm a cop. Don't do anything. Don't chase. It was almost like Home Alone when Macaulay Culkin, Kevin McAllister's like, gonna come and find me in the house, like trying to, like, lure the bandits into a trap. So they, like, follow her, and she just lets this monster just beat the just beat the hell out of these guys.
Yeah.
And that's not very good police work.
Right? And then, like, at the end, they're all smiling, and, like, she's not at all concerned that there are 2 dead guys in this alley, and then a third one. And so I don't know why Goliath didn't just, like, take them on in the streets. I thought, like, presumably they ducked into the alley so that the people who were being carjacked wouldn't see and wouldn't tell anyone. But then they let this third guy get away, right? At the end of that fight. So,
yeah,
I mean,
like,
he's going to be telling someone. But also, she lures them into the alley, and Goliath, like, pops up, and he's got glowing eyes, and they're like, it's a monster. And the third guy, who ends up running away eventually, is like, let's take him. Like, is that dude on PCP or something? This is, like, a freaking stone monster who's 3 times his size with wings and claws, and he's like, I'm going to take him on with his lead pipe. Like, where does he get a lead pipe anyway? That dude is on drugs.
This is New York. Lead pipes are everywhere. So I kind of wanted to talk about the gargoyles themselves a little bit. So what's interesting is, for some reason, Goliath has a name, and he is the leader of the gargoyles. And
no, he only has a name because someone else gave them to him, because in our realm, we don't have names.
Yeah, but so he has one, and he just, takes the name and goes by it, and it's part of his identity. So that's interesting. None of the others have names. I do know ultimately they end up being called, like, Bronx, Brooklyn.
Well, I like how the one who ended up being called Hudson was like, the sky doesn't need a name. What? It's the sky. That's a name. How is that your argument?
Yeah, and then he goes, the river doesn't need a name, and it's like, it's called the Hudson.
Or it would be called the river. Everything has a name.
He goes, yeah, they still call it something colloquially, but he's just like, fine, I'll be Hudson. But the other thing that's weird is...
Yeah, and it took like 2 seconds for him to be like, it sounds good. I'll have a name. Whatever.
Yeah. Well, the thing that also is kind of weird is each of these gargoyles are drastically different in terms of, like, body type and design. In the first episode, you see them flying around, and you see them, like, dive off the castle. You see them come back up. You see them jump from the ground and get back to the sky. And I was like, why don't these wings flap? And then it says in episode 3, they're like, oh, no, we don't fly. We glide.
Yeah.
Off of air pressure and thermal. So it's kind of weird that they don't really establish these traits until episode 3. And still, as of episode 3, I think there's 5 of them. So there's the big fat guy, the small green one, there's the red skinny one, there's Hudson and Goliath, and then there's the dog. So there's 6 characters that presumably they want to sell action figures for. And it takes 3 episodes, not even 3 episodes, to have them named. It's going to be episode 4 or 5 before the others get named. Like, that's not a very good way to sell toys.
That is a little strange, but I also, looking at this, I'm getting the sense that it wasn't necessarily always the same team of people working on it. All the animators are Japanese.
Yeah.
Like 100%. Which is
and
a
the
little
animation
bit strange for a cartoon that the producers are all American on, or presumably American, because they all have English names.
The other thing was the animation was kind of inconsistent. In the first episode, at the very beginning, when it's showing, like, the building collapsing and pieces falling, there was a lot of detail in the background. Like, the cars looked really good. The frame rates were a little off, and that's something that most cartoons in the 80s and 90s had.
Oh yeah, frame rate sucks in all of them.
And that's just, as kids, we kind of just plug in the missing information, like, we don't even notice. But the background detail was really good, and the fight choreography was good. In episode 2 or 3, when they're, like, storming the cave to go rescue the princess, well, they think the princess is in there, there's some weird scenes with very clearly the backgrounds were pre-rendered, and they just kind of, like, pasted figures in. Like, it almost looked kind of South Parky. Like, so the animation was a little inconsistent.
I mean, episode 3, I think they clean up the animation a lot. But getting back to the whole thing with the names and the gliding, I feel like maybe they started writing episode 1 and then they took off with it, and then they realized maybe that they made these characters too impenetrable and too strong too quickly. And so maybe they backpedaled. Or, I mean, like, seeing that all the animators are Japanese, like, maybe that was something they decided after it was already animated, and so they, like, took out some dialogue and plugged that in instead. I'm not really sure. But I actually really like the animation on this. I like that it's darker than other cartoons. I mean, like these days, I'm not really sure what cartoons are doing, but it was a lot darker than other cartoons at the time. And I love that they put in the extra work to do the shadows on the characters, because that's something that really brings you into that universe and like really gives it this great depth that a lot of other cartoon characters don't have.
And what was also interesting with this is, like I said at the beginning of this episode, like I was into it because it was a little bit darker than your Spider-Mans and your Batman cartoons, which I loved. But Spider-Man was a cartoon that was super censored. He was never allowed to throw a punch. So it was always just him dodging and things would fall on the bad guys. Batman was considered a violent cartoon, but not as bad as this. And like there was just still lasers and stuff like that. For some reason they couldn't have guns. In this one they did have like lasers, but there were explosions and grenades and stuff like that. They are throwing punches. They are throwing guys. Bodies are hitting walls and going limp. Like this was a pretty heavy cartoon.
They're straight up killing people in alleys, and it's not even like, you know how usually they'll try and put a lesson into a takedown. Like they could have very easily just like scared the crap out of these guys and, you know, roughed them up a bit and been like, you leave this neighborhood or whatever, you know, put some kind of moral lesson into it. Instead, they just straight up kill them and presumably like just expect the third guy who got away to be like, nah, don't carjack white dudes.
You know what was also pretty progressive in this? So in the scene, and this overlaps, like little bits of it are in episode 1, 2, and 3, but like this separate corporation or whoever they are that's attacking Xanatos, there were like women in this like hit squad coming to steal his corporate secrets, or at least that's what he's saying.
I loved it.
I thought that was pretty cool. And it was like a blonde, long-haired woman, and she like held her own. Like I think she lasted longer than any of the other soldiers.
Yeah. So
that was pretty cool. The show was very progressive for its time. Like there's a lot of like you mentioned, like there's minority characters, female characters. They do Scottish stuff. Like there's a lot of weird stuff that you did not see in cartoons.
And it's interesting because it's not like other cartoons didn't have female villains, but most of the time they had a male counterpart and they worked as a team. Whereas this one, there is that female gargoyle that Goliath gets down with in the beginning and then she turns bad. And I remember her being in pretty much the entire series.
Yeah, so do I. I remember her being a much larger role. I don't agree with that. I mean, we haven't watched it, but I don't remember her just being like a strong, independent female villain. I think that she's ends up in a relationship with Xanatos. I could be wrong.
Wait. Isn't that like bestiality?
Nah, it's fine. If it's a magical creature, it's fine. It's like being with a centaur. It's beautiful.
Ooh, that's a bit much, Mike.
I don't know, man. Like, it's Macbeth and Shakespeare.
A centaur?
And there's a lot of weird stuff. I don't know. I just named a magical creature.
How can you even take that? I mean, that gets dangerous for your health.
Okay, maybe just like a Greek god then. I don't know. But like that used to happen all the time.
Centaur. Yikes.
I could be wrong, but I think later on, I think she actually has a human form. I could be wrong.
Yeah,
but the female gargoyle, she looks more, I don't even think she has a tail.
She looks like Tina Turner.
Yeah, she looks like I don't know about Tina. Yeah, kind of.
That hair.
But she's got like a figure and everything. Like she looks like a grayish blue person with fangs and big ears. I could see like somebody like Xanatos, a billionaire who can have whatever he wants.
He's a little
be into
freaky.
Some freaky stuff.
Yeah.
Going back very briefly to like the character design, like I think you're right that they probably could fly in episode 1, and then they decided to backpedal. Mm-hmm. From the very beginning, I think the little green guy, I think his name is Lexington.
The kind of bald-looking one?
The bald one that's,
He sort of looks
really,
like
really
Bat
small.
Boy.
He kind of reminds me of
from
like
the
Cheech
old
Marin for
tabloids?
some reason. I do remember that. But his wings are set up, they are attached under his arm.
Maybe you're just thinking of Cheech Marin because he was in...
Ferngully?
Yeah.
Maybe. But he has wings that are set up like a flying squirrel type wings, so he definitely wouldn't have been able to fly. Like his would have to be gliding. Some of the others have huge wings that look like they're like dragon wings. Like you would think they would be able to flap them and fly, but you do. And to the credit of the production crew, like you never see them flap. So maybe it was designed from day one to be gliding and.
Well, except the structure of the wings, like they're constructed like bat wings.
Well, I don't have much more to say on it. You didn't really like super watch this as a kid, so I don't know. Did this ruin your childhood by going back to it? It sounded like you wanted to keep watching.
No, like I remember Gargoyles just being this badass cartoon that I got to watch occasionally when we would travel. And I really loved it when I was a kid, and I loved how dark and edgy it was, and it made me a little bit uncomfortable because it was a little bit scary. And that's something I've loved my entire life. And coming back to it as an adult, I actually really want to watch more of it. Like, I want to see what's going to happen. And I'm not sure if I would really be into it, like you said, when it gets a little bit more cartoony. But I want to know the initial story, and I kind of want to see what everyone's angle is, and at least get through all of the to-be-continued episodes that start out, I guess, like the first 5 episodes of the series that really lay the groundwork for the series. I'm curious as to what's going to happen with those, and I really do want to see more of it.
I'm kind of torn because I remember loving the show as a kid, and I remember the story ripping, like just going like boom, 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 like all this weird stuff. Season 1 only has like 13 episodes. I think 13 episodes in season 2, and then season 3 is where it gets kind of weird, and it's a different production crew.
But are you approaching it with the expectation of, should I have liked this as a kid, or are you approaching it with, am I enjoying it right now?
I'm approaching it with, am I enjoying it right now? And like my expectations are so high, like I just expected for some more stuff to happen. I remember watching this TV show with my dad. Like he sat and watched it with us on Saturdays before going to work. I remember thinking, like, going into this episode thinking like, this is a show that's good enough for adults to watch with their kids. And I can see, like, as an adult, I would much rather watch this than, like, the original Power Ranger episodes. As much as I loved Power Rangers, I know those aren't going to hold up. At least I don't think they will. We'll probably do that as a future episode. But I just was left wanting this to go faster. Like, I felt it dragged too much. Like, as an adult, like, a cartoon needs to at least be either funny or just crazy dumb.
There's a ton of setup.
Yeah, it's just too much setup and like not enough payoff yet. Like I know it pays off in the end, but as an adult with not a lot of time, where I'm running 2 podcasts, I've got work, there's Walking Dead, there's so much other premium content right now. It's hard for me to want to just keep...
You have a wife?
I have a beautiful,
I like
loving
how
wife.
Walking Dead rated higher than your spouse.
I wasn't even going to mention you.
Nice. Really nice.
But yeah, basically in a nutshell, there's so much premium content out there right now. It's kind of hard to carve something aside, like a time aside for something that hasn't paid off in an hour yet.
Yeah.
Now, granted, that would be one episode of like a premium drama on Netflix or whatever. I'm kind of torn. Like, if you're gonna keep watching it, like I'm gonna watch it with you. But I could live without watching anymore.
Do you think it's maybe like a Moby Dick situation where back in the day, Herman Melville got paid by word, and so maybe they purchased a certain number of episodes and they had to sort of drag it out to fill them all up?
Well, no, 13's not very much. Like most cartoons were doing 11 to 15 episodes. Generally, in a TV show, I'll give it 3 or 4 episodes before making a decision. Maybe I'd give it 1 more to decide if it's worth my time. But if you're going to watch it, I'll keep watching it because we live together.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily want to watch the entire series. I just kind of want to know what the initial situation is. Yeah, I might watch 5 episodes and then call it good, just so I can figure out what exactly is happening with the stuff that they hint at already.
Yeah, I wouldn't say this ruined my childhood, but I wouldn't say that it's engaged me as an adult so much.
Yeah, I think I was actually pleasantly surprised because I really liked it as a kid, and I think it's still pretty badass. All right, so that is episode 3, and next week we are going to be revisiting Homeward Bound.
Homeward Bound?
Yep.
With Michael J. Fox?
I mean, I don't even remember necessarily liking Homeward Bound as a kid, so this is going to be pretty interesting.
Find out what I remember about Homeward Bound next week on Ruin My Childhood.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.